A mother tells her 8-year-old daughter, if you'll clean your room for the next week, then you're going to get a little gift. But you got to clean your room. The girl gets kind of lazy. She doesn't clean the room. And a few days pass, a few more days pass. She's like, oh, I didn't clean. She feels bad. She climbs up into her mother's lap and says, Mommy, I'm really sorry. I didn't clean my room like you asked me. I will. I'll clean the room. So the mother looks at the child and is accepting. Why should the mother be accepting? Child didn't listen, didn't follow what's supposed to, what they made up. And now just to come to the end and you're going to do what you got to do. But the mother is not just forgiving, but why is she forgiving? Where does that come from? After all, she did say to her daughter, gave the marching orders. The marching orders weren't followed. How do we understand that? We understand it intuitively, but what's the explanation behind it? Welcome to Tani today. I'm Rabbi Ronnie Fine, coming to you from Chabad Zuch and Kadeshim in Montreal, Canada, where it's a privilege and a pleasure to share with you the Tanya. We're continuing our journey together. Egeris HaKodesh, the epistle, the teachings of Egeris HaTshuva, rather, of Tshuva, of penitence. What does it mean that we can return? How do we get the opportunity to do that even? Why are we giving that opportunity? In the jungle, you make a wrong move, finished. No second chance. In life, in many instances, no second chance. You bear the consequences. Finished. But in human relationships, we see that there can be a second chance. There can be the idea of return, of tshuva, of penitence. How do we understand the process? So we are in the 8th chapter. And in the previous chapter, we spoke about the true and direct way of tshuva, of return, of penitence. And that included two things that if we meditate upon it, we contemplate this deeply, to let it affect us, then the fence that's broken in life that needs to be fixed can get fixed. It can get fixed. So how does it work? At an appropriate time, whether it's before you go to sleep or at another time where you could kind of more self-reflect, what are you reflecting on? That you have great compassion over your divine nature, your divine soul. And the source of the divine soul and the divine itself in the Shekhinah, divine presence. You arouse great compassion. Before that, you're reflecting on everything that we said, to have compassion and to crush the negative nature of the body and the animal soul, that it's self-directed. So now, having this compassion, seeking God's compassion, seeking supreme mercies of the 13 divine attributes of the supreme will of God. When a person does that, right, which in God's name is alluded to by the tip of the letter Yud pointing upwards. Yud is God's divine wisdom. The source of wisdom is the divine will of God, pointing with that tip upwards, beyond. So you're transcending the name of God in your repentance. You're reaching to a deeper place in God that's beyond God and his as creator, which that is creator, the intelligence of God in creation, the divine emotions of God in creation, the 6 emotions, 6 days of the week, or 7 days, rather 7 days, 7 emotions, 7 days of the week. And you're touching the divine will of God, where there's compassion, mercy. On that level, the sin doesn't exist. The sin existed on the level of the hay that it fell. So now God's name is incomplete. God is incomplete. So we have to get up. God's name is incomplete. We have to reach a higher place, divine compassion, the will of God, an infinite form of compassion. That now what it does is a new divine flow comes into the name. And now it's a greater flow of divine energy, divine light, that it brings a cleansing to the individual soul that did a sin and now it has done penitence. It corrects all the defects. God forgives the iniquity, the transgression, and he cleanses. And no longer are you getting vitality from a negative force. It's coming now from God's name because it's been reconnected, because we've reconnected to God. So the hay's returned to his proper place in God and in me, because that hay is part and parcel of my makeup, of my soul. So now it's a part of me. I'm getting directly now energy and light and life from beyond God's name, because beyond God's name wasn't affected. God's name was affected, but not beyond. And therefore, when we touch that place, like that 8-year-old daughter who didn't follow her mother's command or request, if you will, clean your room and then you'll get a gift. She didn't do it. But she sat in her mother's lap and said, I'm really sorry. I was foolish. I just got carried away, just enjoying myself and not listening to what you told me I should do. What did she do? She touched a deeper place in her mother. A deeper place in her mother, that there is no sin. There is no wronging. And therefore, when you touch that place, you can bring that light, that life. And that's what we do. We bring that light and life in the relationship we have with God, because we touch that deeper place beyond his name, divine compassion of God. And he cleanses us from all negativity. Amazing. That's taking us out of a bad place. And now we're going to a higher level of tshuva. Tshuva ilah, which is putting us into a good space. What's that good space? That we cleave to God in a remarkable unity, ultimate union with Him. It's like, before you blow some air, that air is inside of you. It's bound up in one with you. Well, that's the unity that we achieve on the higher level of unity, higher level of tshuva. It's a perfect form of tshuva. Tshuva ilah, as it's called, supernal, lofty level of tshuva. As a Torah, as a Zohar rather explains, whereas the lower level is dealing with your stuff rather than facing your stuff, rather than stuffing your face. That's the lower level of tshuva. You have things you got to deal with. The higher level of tshuva, there's no negativity to deal with. It's about learning Torah with awe and love. It's about having a sense of awe and love in our connection to God. That's a higher level of return to God. And that is, in God's name, Yud and Hey, which is Chochmah and Bina, father and mother give birth to the child. Vav is a child. What's the child? Emotions, love and awe of God. Because emotions are begotten. One level of emotions is begotten. We're talking about divine sense here, are begotten through your mind, through Chochmah and Bina, through understanding and perception of God in your life and the truth of God, that it will bring you to a feeling of love and awe towards God and bring you to return to Him. And this is the idea that the penitents are greater than even the perfectly saintly. Why? Because return means there's a distance that you are overcoming to return. And that distance is God's infinite. We're finite. On this higher level of tshuva, it's not because we did something wrong. It's that we are finite, returning to the infinite. And therefore, we, like what we are doing now in our study of Torah, doing it in a way that it is with a sense of awesomeness and love, right? It brings a longing and an intensity to connect, because distance makes the heart grow fonder and therefore want to more deeply connect. And that's the higher form of tshuva. And we approach God, the King, with a much more intensity and forcefulness, because return means what? You took some steps back. You were here it's in the higher levels, not because you did something wrong, but you sense the distance. God's infinite, you're finite. And now you are overcoming that distance. That's the higher level. With that, we conclude chapter 8. We go now into chapter 9, which is going to define for us the higher level of tshuva. The higher level of tshuva is returning, not the latter hay in God's name, that's the lower level of tshuva, which has to do with the divine presence of God. It has to do with our actions, our words, our speech, and our thoughts, our cogitated willful thoughts that we have to return properly. We have to mend and fix. That's the lower level of tshuva. The higher level of tshuva is the former hay, which is also toshuv hay, to return the hay, but you're returning the former hay in God's name. You're not returning it because you did something wrong. That's the lower level. That's owning your stuff, dealing with it, fixing what you got to fix in your life. The higher level is bina. Bina means understanding. When you understand the goodness of God, the greatness of God, that brings to an emotion, a feeling of love and awe towards God. The metaphor is like a mother crouching over her chicks. Bina is the mother that has an offspring. When you understand, when you have a perception, proper perception in your mind, and understanding of the goodness of God, the greatness of God, the compassion of God, the only reality of God, well, that's going to give you a love and awe towards God as a result. And when you think about God's greatness, you comprehend that in your mind, then you have a feeling in your heart. Then you're going to love the Lord, your God, because he is your life. This is not because it's just latent in your heart, in your soul, you come to love God. It comes from, it's something more that of your effort, of your thinking and meditating upon, right? And as opposed to, sometimes we just instinctually feel a connection. That's not what we're talking about here. This tshuva ilah, the higher level of tshuva, which is returning the former hay in God's name, which means our perception, our understanding of the greatness of God, right? Which will lead us to a reverence, to an awesomeness before God that we will sense, right? Further, so there'll be that sense of awesomeness, but there'll also be a sense of love. And that love will lead you to want to cleave your spirit in the spirit of God. So verse says that he kisses me with the kisses of his mouth. That's a cleaving. Then we cleave to God, our spirit. What does that mean? What does it mean to cleave to God? How does it express itself? Well, God's merciful. So if I want to cleave to him, guess what? I'm also going to be merciful as he is. Because I understand that. I get that. I will study Torah as we're doing now with great concentration, with great effort to grasp and to get it. Because that's cleaving to God. That's his kiss. Kiss is with the mouth. We mouth his words in the study of Torah. We have his wisdom inside of me that's a part of me. That's when he breathes into me through the Torah teachings. His wisdom, that guess what? His wisdom becomes my wisdom. I start seeing the world the way he sees the world. I start thinking that way as a result and speaking the words of God as a result. So that's thinking, speaking, and my deeds then will be in order to cleave to God. That's in your thoughts you're cleaving, in your speech you're cleaving to God, and in your actions you cleave to him by being charitable. God revives all of us. We're only alive because of him. We don't have we're not the energizing bunny that we are self-contained, maintained, self-existing. I don't create myself. God's my energy, and he brings to me who has nothing. He gives me life. So we want to cleave to God. So then we give to those who have nothing. We give them life. So it means physically giving charity, right? Or to, those places that help those people. By the way, it doesn't. Mine's still. Sorry, I think I lost. Okay, welcome, folks. I know. Okay, still live streaming, but I somehow lost it. Okay. So my apologies, just to continue. So I want to cleave out of love, my spirit and God's spirit. So it's expressed in thought, speech, and action. It's going to, in the action, as we said, in being charitable. And this is the ultimate in the spirit, cleaving to the spirit of God, ultimate attachment. And with this, then we can understand what we spoke about previously in the first chapter, that that if a person that's sinned with zera lebatola, wasteful emission of semen, and all the more so if it has to do with relations that are, excuse me a second, no, okay, illicit relations, that's a blemish in the mind. Blemish in the mind is because the semen that's where it begins, is in the mind. Specifically. And therefore, the way to fix it is through the mind. What does it mean through the mind? In other words, it's not enough to fix the lower level of tshuva, which is to fix your behavior. You need the higher level of tshuva, which, as we said, hey, there refers to bina, understanding. You need to increase in your understanding of God, increase in your understanding of Torah teachings, which means, what does it mean to increase? That if you were accustomed to study one page, learn 2 pages of Talmud, for example. Increase in the good that you're doing and the cleaving that you are doing with God. That brings the tshuva for those illicit relations. Now, of course, you have to fix, but it's not sufficient, the lower level. You need the higher level, because you need to incorporate a new understanding or add, right? There's something been severed. Remember that when you sin, we're attached to our soul down here at the bottom. And my fist over here is the soul in my body. The fist is the body. And up here, it's the soul that is in its root source, not in the body, but in the divine presence of God, Shekhinah, right? And God blows from over here, from that part of the soul into here. Sin creates a blockage, an obstacle. that the breath of God cannot come in, the vitality cannot come into my soul and my body, and therefore creates an obstruction. And I'm getting it now from klipa, from the negative force. So regular tshuva means you have to correct you've snipped the rope. You have to do tshuva to bring back the vitality direct. For this sin that we're talking about now, it's not sufficient. You have to do the higher level of tshuva, which means that you have to cleave to God with the love of God. And in this instance means you have to increase. Tshuva means therefore to increase, to return. Return means to increase in order to get the vitality, right? So you've now cut this. You want to get the vitality back. So you need to increase in your Torah study specifically. And now what happens when you have that it was cut off? Well, when you do tshuva, you've knotted the rope back together, and it is now bound up, and it's actually stronger now than it was originally. So this higher level of tshuva allows, the lower level also, but here it also does it, of tshuva, but this higher level that we're talking about now specifically allows for the disconnect, the snap in the rope to not just be bound up back together, but to be bound up in a stronger way than it was originally, which is amazing. So not only is God forgiving, but he's giving us an opportunity that we can mend the relationship and make it stronger. So when we do wrong to another person, of course, we have to own it, and we have to work on, if the higher, that's the own it is the lower level of tshuva. The higher level is do something to double up. So here we're talking in reference to God, of course, and that means doubling up. Well, you learned Tanya once a week. Learn Tanya twice a week. You learned Tanya every day, so do something else. Review it. Whatever you're increasing. The tshuva, the return means here to increase in your connection to God. Very powerful. Okay. Oh, I can't see any questions unless it's on Instagram. Oh, I see my good friend David. Welcome. Thank you for joining. And Doctor's with us. Joe is with us. Natalie, Marlene, Andrew. Okay. So that's the end. We did chapter 8 and chapter 9. Okay. We'll have to deal with questions tomorrow that somehow got lost today. I'm Rabbi Ron Fine, coming to you for Chabad Zich and Kadesh Montreal, Canada. It's a privilege and pleasure to share with you, Tanya. Have an amazing, great day. 6:30.